Hi everyone, welcome back to Grandpa Mark's Hobbies and a how-to video on tearing down your Gaahleri GHAD-98D dual action airbrush. What we're going to do is we're going to take this thing completely apart today, and I'm going to show you how to grease it and what those little O-rings and white things are for. I've been asked a couple of times. I'm apologizing right now that I didn't do this sooner, but I've kind of been busy. I'm loving this. I love this box. These things, if you're worried about shipping, getting these things shipped to your house, you don't have to, because these things are just pretty much solid as a rock. So I'm not going to put the cup back on it. All that does is screws on. But I'll pull the grease out. We'll pull this little baggie out that people have been asking me, what are those for? I leave the little rubber tip right in here. And that way when I put it away, I put it in a rubber tip and set it down. And it just, I don't know, I think it's kind of good practice. Just take care of everything like that. But let me get that out the way. Bring this over. I'll move the grease. And we'll tear this thing down like I always do. We're going to tear it down way more than I usually do for normal cleaning. So let's talk about it first. You have your paint limiter back here. What do they call this? Preset fluid control knob. What this does is this just keeps your trigger from going all the way back and limits how much paint comes out the front. I run this all the way to the back to where when the trigger's all the way pulled back, I have a gap in it, just like that. But if you want, you run that up, and that'll keep this trigger from pulling back. You can adjust this until this thing hits it, and then you can adjust it farther until it goes all the way to where it won't pull back anything but air. So that's all that's for. I was asked a couple of times what it does. It's as easy as that. So let's start off like I would normally be tearing this down. I always start from the back. I'll take this off and move it out the way. I'm going to loosen my jam nut and pull the needle back about a 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to give that just a little snug, just so it doesn't end up in the carpet. So now we're going to take our protector off the front. We're going to take our nozzle cover or jet cover, whatever you want to call it. And usually your jet comes with it, so be careful about that. That will come out when you drop it down on the table. So we're going to set this out of the way for just a second because I want to talk about this jet. They call it self-centering. This little piece right here that sticks out the back, that will line up with that piece of copper in there, or brass, and it self-centers. Just like that, it'll fall in there, and you can't make a mistake. It's in there, so when you put your cover on, it should thread down with no resistance whatsoever. If there is any, you need to start over again. So let's take this off. We'll move those out of the way. I'm going to take the jam nut, loosen it back up. We're going to push this out the front. So now be careful. You don't want to bend it, and you don't want to stab yourself. Those things are sharp as nails. And we're going to call it sharp as needles, not nails. We're going to pull this all the way out, just like that. And I'm going to show you the tip of this needle right now. Look at how nice that is. I don't polish my needles because I'm just petrified of ruining the angle on them. The company knows what they're supposed to be, and they do a great job with that. But look at this thing, looks polished. I actually, when I was talking to them the one day, I asked them, did they polish this? And they said they don't actually polish it, but the way they manufacture it, it comes out with almost a mirror finish. And that's what it is too. Very nice. So now we're back to this. The needle's out. Everything's ready to go. The whole front end assembly's off. And this is where you would go, you know, you would do your deep cleaning at the end of the day. This is about as far as you'd need to take it down. But we're going to go all the way here. We're going to take the jam nut off, and do yourself a favor. When you're tearing this thing, when you take this off, take this jam nut off, because for some reason, the jam nut has less threads than this does. So when you're turning this, when you break this loose and you're turning it, this has very fine threads in here. This has semi-coarse threads. So as you're turning this out, this jam nut will walk itself off and end up in the carpet. I'm giving you a heads up, and you could probably figure out how I know that. Not fun to be crawling around on your hands and knees looking for a jam nut on carpet. So, like I said, this is long-winded threads. They go way in here. And when you take this out, you're going to have 3 pieces in here. You're going to have, I'm going to tilt this and give it a tap. I'm going to take these out. Well, this piece first. Look at how nice that's machined. And the threads feel so nice taking it out. Now we're going to take out our guide and our spring. Here's your spring, your guide, and what do they call this? They call this the lever guide right here. This kind of stays on, but be careful with it because it will fall off. I mean, I think it can fall off. It does on a lot of the other ones. And you want to remember the orientation, which is nice, that if it does fall off or whatever, the box will show you which way this S is supposed to go, so that you know when you put it back in, that's the way it's supposed to go, because it does get confusing. Even after years of messing with them, it does get confusing, and you're like, what am I doing? So that's just a quick heads up there. If you look down inside here, well, let's go one step farther. This is where we're going to take our trigger out, and I'm going to set that off to the side just for a second. We're going to come right back to that. But if you look down inside there, way deep inside there, there's a little slot and a brass piece. Now that brass piece will come out of there, and there's an O-ring behind that brass piece. If you start getting paint running back into the back side of this, that's when your O-ring is going to need to be replaced in here. There's tools to come in there to take that out. A jeweler's flat screwdriver will work. Out of all the airbrushes I've ever had, I've only had to change that O-ring. Never. Literally, I've never had to change it. I've never had the paint running back. I think a lot of that is because I use acrylics, strictly acrylics, so I'm not getting the harsh chemicals on them. And I push my needle this way through the front, so I'm not pulling paint and everything back in there to where I have to run a bottle brush in there to clean it out. But it's in there. It will unscrew. It comes out, and then the O-ring's in there, and you change that O-ring, and you're good to go. And when you're putting the needle in there, you'll feel that needle come up and hit that O-ring and give you some resistance. So there's that. And I'm going to go even one step farther with this. Well, 2 steps, I guess, because we're going to take off our quick disconnect, which is very cool that they send these. If you don't have one, if you don't have the female piece for this that goes on the hose, you can get them on Amazon for like $9, and then it'll come with 2 more of these, but they send that piece with them. This is your air valve. It's called a Schrader valve in like a bicycle tire, air conditioning and things like that. What that does is when you push down on the trigger, it actually pushes down on this little brass piece here, lets air come out this, fills this chamber, runs down this part, goes inside this chamber, comes out a hole back here, fills this cavity, runs out over top of that jet, goes through the little hole, then the paint will come down, get sucked out of the inside of the jet through the little pipe, come out, atomize, and spray onto your stuff. It's really that simple. If you look, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but if you look, you can see the little hole going this way at the very top there, and that's which way the air goes. It's just that simple. But we don't need to take that off. And you don't have, unless you get dirt up in there, you'll never have to take that off. You won't have to worry about cleaning this. But then again, I use a water separator in my airline. If you don't, you might get junk up in here to where you pull the trigger, you release it, and it's still blowing air. If that happens, take this thing apart. You might have to really go into there and give it a good cleaning and blow it out and stuff like that. But if you run one of those little water air separators, you shouldn't have a problem with that. Now, we're to the point where we're pretty much gutted. The only thing I didn't take out was that little brass piece, and I don't want to mess up that O-ring. What do you grease and why? First thing, Gaahleri says grease this. This is the bottom part of your trigger that pushes down on that brass piece that fits down inside this little hole in here, which is a wear point. So you take the grease and you just do this. I mean, you don't need a whole bunch of it. I'm really that is all you're going to need. And then I sucked it back off. That's all you're going to need right there. Just now I'm not pushing any more out. I'm just kind of taking that tip and pushing it around there. Get it up tight where the little hinge is. But that's all you need on there. And then that goes down into that little hole, and it keeps it from wearing out. So we're going to set this off to the side, sticking straight up. Now, I've had people say, grease the needle, the back part of the needle. Well, I don't like doing that because that's just giving me an opportunity to get contaminations on the needle, on your paint, and spots, spits, whatever. I don't do that. I don't see a need to do that. That all kind of moves together. There's no wear point on this, because if you think about it, this goes inside here, this goes through here, and then it's locked into place. So that needle goes back and forth. There is an O-ring here, and it runs up and down that O-ring. Well, I don't want to get that grease on that O-ring and have that grease pushed through, because it'll get through there. Then the air takes it and runs it out the front, and you're trying to figure out what the heck you did wrong on your paint. I've never had it happen, but I know somebody that's had it happen, and it drove him crazy. He did a complete clean of his airbrush, and I watched him put the grease on the needle. I says, don't do that. I says, that might be what you're getting. He cleaned the needle off all the way again, and he painted perfectly after that. But before that, he was going nuts trying to figure out what was going on. So that's that. Now, what I do grease that isn't in the book, and it's just because I take it off all the time, and there's really no way for it to get anywhere down the tube to the paint, is I take and put just a tiny bit on these threads. And you saw me put the grease on the trigger. All I do is I take the tip and I just put what was left over on the tip on these threads. That's it. I don't add any more to that. Now the other one that we have is this piece right here. Okay, remember this is where I'm looking for parts here. That's where this goes through. I could put a little bit of grease on here, but I don't recommend it because it has a chance to contaminate your needle. These threads don't get pulled out very often, so I don't even grease these. They're steel threads on steel, and they're such a fine thread that it would take eons for those things to wear out enough to where they wouldn't thread up. And they're cut in a way to where they're kind of sloppy until they get down to the end. So again, not necessary. So let's use as little grease as you can, okay? Now that we got this completely torn down, you're going to say, what about the O-rings and the little white things? The little white Teflon pieces are replacements for right here. This will pop off, that'll pop on, and you go back to work. The little tiny O-rings go right on the front here, and they put a good seat where this comes up on that. And that keeps air from escaping here and not building up pressure and then letting air come back up through into your cup. So now we got this all torn apart. We got our grease, we got our Teflons, we got our O-rings. We're all set to go. Quick reassembly. What we're going to do first is the part we already put the air Schrader valve back on, is we're going to put the hardest thing for me, and that's this little piece right here. And that's just because I'm so stinking blind. I'm so fumble-fingered because I got big honking fingers, and you got to get this little piece that moves around in that little hole. So what I'll do is I'll tilt this downhill just a little bit like that. Downhill a little bit. I'll tilt this back so that I can see what I'm doing in there. I'll kind of wiggle it around until it drops in the hole. Push it down and up and down. Make sure that you're moving your air valve. See that going up and down? I'm looking at it, not showing you. See how that goes up and down? So you know you're in there. Now we're going to put this in. And I'm always nervous about this because my first couple airbrushes were so cheap that they didn't fit for diddly, and I always had to struggle with this part. But I'll put this in at an angle like this to start and kind of just wiggle it around until it goes on there. Now that's in there. We'll grab our spring that probably rolled away somewhere, which it did. I'm going to pause you and find my spring, and I'll bring it right back. That's what happens when I don't have a visor. I didn't even have to shut it off. It was literally right in front of me. So here's the spring. That just slides over the top, goes down, and it'll hit positive stop. And now we're going to put this back on. Slides over, it goes over top of the spring, comes up, thread it on. There should be absolutely no resistance here. This should fit in there and just screw all the way down till it stops. I'm keeping my finger on the trigger so that it doesn't fall out, because the needle is actually what holds that trigger in place. So you'll be real surprised when you're almost ready to drop the needle in, you tilt it upside down, and that dang trigger falls out, and you got to take it back apart and start over. So like I said, these are long-winded. So there we go. I'm down. I give it just a little snug with finger tight. You don't have to crank anything on here. Just, it's there. It's not going to unthread itself, and you shouldn't be tightening your jam nut up enough to where you're starting to back this off. So we're good there. I'm going to turn around. I tilt mine straight up and down this way to put my jet on. I'm going to put my jet in there. And it's a lot easier to do when it's not on camera, trust me. We're going to put the jet cap on. And again, if you're feeling resistance, you need to stop. This should just screw on there nice and easy. The threads are cut loose. That's it. You don't have to crank it on. Just get it on there to where it hits bottom. Your O-ring will take care of the rest. Bring this up till it touches. Just snug it finger. I'm holding it tight enough to where I've got resistance, but I'll let it slide through my fingers. So I'm not really cranking on it. I'm letting my fingers draw across it. Now we are ready for the needle and the jam nut. So put the jam nut on, pointy end to the back. Bring it down just a little bit, maybe 1.5, 2 turns. Get our needle ready. I like to come forward with it to where my finger is on the jam nut. Bring my needle in. And just be careful with this. It should slide all the way in there with no resistance until it gets to that gasket that I was telling you about, that little O-ring right in here. And you'll feel that. You'll push it in until you feel it. Right there, I hit that O-ring right here. So right now, the tip of my needle is just about ready to come out of this hole. And we're going to push it all the way up till it stops. Done. That's it. You don't have to push it all the way hard. Just get it up there to where it touches, and you're good. Tighten your jam nut. Put your cap on the back. There's a hole in this in the back. Make sure that that needle lines up. Don't jam it on there. That should go. That should thread in that little hole. See there, just like that. Screw this on. This has an O-ring there, so you don't have to crank it on. Bring it on. I made contact. I go another maybe 3/4 of a turn, and that's it. There's no air going to come out of there or anything. That little O-ring there is just to make it to where it's convenient for you. You can have this facing any way you want. I've always had it just like that, just because that's the way I do it. If you want it to turn this way, you can. It's whatever you want. It sits right there on my hand, and it's comfortable. Now we'll put our quick disconnect off. Put that back on. I do tighten that up just a little bit, but it's knurled. It tightens up. It will release really easy. And buddy, you're ready to paint. That's it. It's that simple. What do we have here? We have 6 minutes into tearing this thing apart. Well, I'm sorry, I stopped it. We probably have 15 minutes into tearing this thing apart and putting it all the way back together again. And that's with me talking my way through it. If you're just doing it, it's quick. And again, that is a complete teardown. You don't usually need to do that, especially if you push that needle through the front. You'll take the back off. You'll pull the needle. You'll take the whole front stuff off. Drive your needle out the front. Clean your front end out. Clean all of this out. Clean your needle. Put it back together again. Put it away knowing that the next time you take it out, it's going to work great. How often do I grease it? When I think about it, it depends on how often I paint with it. With the 2 airbrushes now, that cuts my load in half. Well, really, it cuts it to where this is about 2/3 and now it's 1/3 because there's always a lot of smaller parts and bigger parts. So, I don't know, maybe once a month. when I'm really into it. But anyhow, Gaahleri, this is the GHAD-98D. I love it. I know you'll love it. It paints great. Easy to tear apart. I just showed you that. So if you're thinking about it, jump in the deep end of the pool. Hi, I'm Mark. This is Grandpa Mark's Hobbies. Y'all have a great day and a better tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching.